when I introduce Bob, it's my great pleasure to have him as our speaker today. I've known Bob for 30 plus years as a golfing partner and also a friendly adversary on the golf course. But Bob has been a great friend, and I'm really happy to have him here. Bob and his family moved to Berkeley in 1935 when Bob was a young teenager, and he attended Garfield Junior High School. He went to Berkeley High, was on the track team, and actually graduated from Berkeley High. Then walked a couple of blocks up the street to Cal, and then from there went to medical school at the University of California in San Francisco. After medical school, was right near the end of the World War II. He went into the Army and was stationed in Germany, in Munich, in the 98th General Hospital there in Munich for a couple of years. Then returning and had a fellowship in neurosurgery at the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota for 3 years, and was board certified in neurosurgery. Came back to the Bay Area, practiced neurosurgery in the East Bay for 46 years, and chief of surgery and chief of staff at several hospitals here in the East Bay, Merritt, Peralta, Children's Hospital, chief of surgery at neurosurgery at those hospitals. He published several papers on neurosurgery and did research in Parkinson's disease. Anyway, we could probably do a whole half-hour program just on Bob's establishment in the neurosurgery world in the East Bay especially. I'm not giving the program, but thanks for your encouragement. Anyway, I would like to introduce Dr. Bob, who will speak about his famous brother, General Ford Weyand, another Berkeley guy. So Bob, take over.
Thank you, John. Now I have a mic, and I hope you can hear me okay. Anyway, welcome to Berkeley Breakfast Club members and the guests. Thank you for letting me talk to you about my brother, General Frederick Carlton Weyand. He was my hero and should be one of yours. How many of you have ever heard of him? Raise your hands. Oh, that's good, because I'll be able to educate a few more of you. It is interesting that the Breakfast Club was formed in 1936, 1 year after our family moved from Fresno to Berkeley, and about when my story starts. According to my research, your club was founded to foster, promote, explore, and publicize the educational, cultural, civic, commercial, industrial, recreational, residential assets of the city of Berkeley. And its relationship with the University of California. The life story of General Ford Weyand is a good example of this relationship. And this is a picture of him in his full uniform. And I asked you, would you buy a used car from this man? I think so. I did. And anyway, he was born in Arbuckle, in the Sacramento Valley, to Fred and Bella Weyand.
Somebody give help.
Okay. This is Fred with his mother and father. His father was a class of 16 of UC Berkeley, and he had been on the track team. After college, he married a beautiful girl who was living in Quincy, California, and they returned to his farm. Several years after Fred was born, his father suffered financial disaster. He expanded his rice farming by leasing adjacent land to his own farm and then having his crop flooded out, losing everything. He started working for the Associated Oil Company to pay off his debts and continued there for 37 years. This shows he was born September 15th, 1916, and he died February 10th, 2010. My father's job resulted in the family moving 6 times in 11 years. Arbuckle, to Vacaville, to Chehalis, Washington, to Paso Robles, to Sacramento, to Fresno, and finally to Berkeley. We were blessed during those years with parents who had rules for us, but we were raised with praise. We had a very happy childhood, and in Fresno, our hero was a straight-A student and the center of the championship high school basketball team. He said he couldn't dribble very well, he couldn't shoot the bucket, but he could jump. And at 6'4", he was really an asset to the team because in those days they started the basketball games by the jump ball, and he could really jump and help the team with that. He started at UC Berkeley after we moved to Berkeley, and he pledged into the Sigma Chi fraternity. When he showed our father the pledge pin, he was told that, take it back, we can't afford it. And he did. And then he got himself a job working in a service station. He tried out for the rowing team and the tennis team, but his lack of discipline resulted in clashes with coaches Cubby Bright and Tom Stowe, and so he moved on. He did win the UC Berkeley Intramural Solo Championship, and he did well academically until his junior year. Then when, as our dad said, he discovered girls. He then regrouped and was in upper division ROTC and graduated after 5 years with a major in criminology. He later recalled that ROTC resulted in marked improvement in his discipline. He was also inspired by 2 professors in criminology, August Vollmer and Paul Leland Kirk. They set him on the road of scientific inquiry. Facts and truth became his mantra. These 2 men were national leaders in scientific criminology. After graduation, Fred applied to be a Berkeley policeman. This department was considered one of the best in the nation. He was thin for his height at 6'4", and I remember him consuming large amounts of bananas and milk to increase his weight on the day he was have his physical examination. He did pass the requirements and was accepted into the Berkeley Police Force. We were of modest means, and we shared one room in our 2-room two-bedroom house in Berkeley. We slept together in a double bed. I can't imagine that these days. He taught me how to be able to coast our 1936 Plymouth sedan from Grizzly Peak Boulevard through North Berkeley into our garage in 801 Peralta Avenue with an empty gas tank. Our patient father solved his problem and put a 50-gallon tank of gas in our garage so that he could refuel our car after we returned it empty. After joining the Berkeley Police Department, he married Arlene Langhart. They bought a house in Berkeley. He loved police work and his fellow policemen. He settled in for the long haul. He bought a 1940 deluxe Ford coupe and installed a large, used fire engine siren under the hood. He made lifelong friends with many of his fellow policemen, including Chiefs John Holstrom and Addison Fording. He continued these friendships for many years. However, this life in Berkeley was interrupted when he was called to active duty in the Army in June 1941. He was assigned to the Coast Artillery at Presidio at Fort Scott, Presidio, San Francisco. His career in the Army was remarkable. This is a slide, I know you can't read it, but it shows his progression from second lieutenant to four-star general. Now, it's hard to understand how some people succeed and some don't. Intelligence, physical fitness, personality, providence, being in the right place at the right time, and luck were all involved in his advancement to the top of the Army. Serving our country in 3 wars alone was a great accomplishment. He learned the lessons of not being prepared and having poor intelligence of our enemy, which he emphasized many times in speeches and interviews. His first tour was with General Vinegar Joe Stilwell as intelligence officer in India, Burma, and China war zones. At one point, he was advised to switch to infantry in order to advance his career in the Army, and so he did. The next war our country was involved in was Korea, and he was commander of the 1st Battalion, 7th Infantry Regiment. That's in his combat outfit. He found our troops were poorly prepared and equipped in this war. This article appeared in a magazine called Guideposts in July 1976, entitled General Frederick C. Weyand, the distinguished Chief of Staff of the Army, recalls the time when faith made all the difference. The morale of his troops were being severely tested in the battle conditions in Korea. He instituted the practice of having religious worship services of all faiths on the battlefields. He decided to be baptized. Now, the chaplain was a Baptist, and he told him he would immerse him in the river, and it was the middle of winter. Fred checked around and found a Lutheran chaplain who was able to do the ceremony by sprinkling him with holy water on his head. Under his leadership, there was marked improvement in morale and performance of his battalion. His wife Arlene, who was living in Healdsburg at the time, a town where she was born and raised, decided to send supplies to his battalion. With community support, they collected great amounts of personal needs for the troops. An article covering this story appeared in Reader's Digest magazine, December 1953, entitled "The Town That Adopted a Battalion," and that became quite famous. Even they had a TV program related to it. And this is a slide of his awards and ribbons, and I would like to talk about two of these. In Korea, as commander of his battalion, he was given the Air Medal, resulting from his desire to having better intelligence about the enemy. The weather was so overcast that the Air Force could not do reconnaissance, so he strapped himself on the wing of an Army plane and flew low level over the enemy taking pictures with a little camera, and this provided invaluable information to the subsequent battle plan. Hard to imagine.
Yeah.
Commanding the 25th Division out of Hawaii, he was cited and awarded the Distinguished Service Cross. I would like to read the citation. Quote, "On 8 January 1967, one of his companies became pinned down by intense Viet Cong fire. The unit had lost all radio contact and by nightfall was completely surrounded. Unmindful of the danger, General Weyand accompanied the first helicopter into the besieged company early the next morning. He quickly organized the evacuation of the dead and wounded and dauntlessly walked around the treacherous perimeter, comforting the casualties and encouraging the beleaguered defenders. His personal presence on the battlefield was a source of boundless inspiration and enabled his men to hold out until relief arrived. On another occasion, on the 3rd of February, while flying over War Zone C, his pilot monitored a radio transmission stating that 2 vehicles and 10 men were lost in hostile territory. The interrogation patrol had accidentally strayed into Viet Cong infested terrain, and all attempts to reach them had failed. Realizing the urgency of the situation, General Weyand himself began a meticulous search of the area until he spotted the 2 vehicles heading deeper into hostile territory. Despite the threats of mines and numerous insurgents in the area, he ordered his pilot to land the aircraft. With a complete disregard for safety, General Weyand then jumped from the helicopter, flagged down the errant patrol, and turned it around. As the vehicles headed back, he called for covering artillery fire and had his command ship fly low-level escort until the patrol reached friendly lines. His singular courage and aggressive determination during both situations were responsible for saving the endangered lives of his men. Here's a picture of some of my books, which contain articles about Fred. Amazing, all of them were complimentary. The book written by Senator John McCain and Mark Salter is called Hard Call: Great Decisions and Extraordinary People Who Made Them. John Merchant read this book in a chapter about General Fred Weyand and suggested that I give this talk to you. I would recommend that you might read it sometime. Throughout his life, he remained a modest man with a wonderful sense of humor. When he was the Army's legislative liaison to Congress, he met General John F. Kennedy. When President Kennedy asked him, "Well, what's your job?" he replied that he was the Army's legislative liaison to Congress. Kennedy looked at him and said, "I sure would not want your job." And Fred looked back and said, "Well, I wouldn't want your job either." When the Vietnam War was over, he was assigned for his final duty as a commanding officer of the Pacific. After a few months, he received a call from Army Chief of Staff General Creighton Abrams. General Hay, the Army Vice Chief, had been appointed by President Nixon to be his Chief of Staff in the White House. General Abrams asked Fred to return to Washington to be his Vice Chief. He told Fred that the only excuse he would have was that it would cause a divorce. He talked it over with Arlene and she agreed, and he accepted the job and returned to Washington. He and Abrams again became a great team. However, General Abrams died of lung cancer after several years, and Fred was appointed by President Richard Nixon to be Chief of Staff of the Army. It was a turbulent time for the Army, as Congress opted to go from a conscription-type Army to a volunteer Army, and women were welcome to play a larger role. Fred was later praised for managing these changes and others. You can read the report online that Fred made when President Ford sent him back to Vietnam in 1975 to evaluate whether the U.S. should re-enter that conflict. It was an honest appraisal, and Congress and the nation had made up their minds to leave Vietnam. When I visited him at the Pentagon near the end of his active duty, I remember vividly that he said he turned down a chance to be chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and he was ready to retire. He showed me a map of the Washington, D.C. area, and most of the four-star military had retired. They usually obtained well-paid positions as consultants to defense industry companies. He said that his wife had followed him around for 37 years, and she wanted to go to Hawaii, and that's where they went. Here's a picture of him in his cities. And he went to work for a bank and was very active in the community. He served as president of the American Red Cross, president of the Honolulu Rotary, active membership in Shriners Association of the U.S. Army, U.S. West Center for Asia Pacific Center for Security Studies, the Hawaii Theater, the Honolulu Symphony, the Aloha United Way, the Bohemian Club, Berkeley Fellows, and several other charity organizations. He became one of 4 trustees managing the billion-dollar Damon estate. He was an excellent golfer with a 3 handicap in his younger years. He was chairman of the Hawaiian Open in 1981, and this picture is from the program that year. He allowed me to play in a Pro-Am tournament, and for the next 10 years, I was able to do that. He was a talented musician, playing tenor, saxophone, clarinet, and Hawaiian steel guitar. He went to New Orleans with the Shrine Dixieland Band as their lead saxophone player. Okay. I'm sure you're aware of the Berkeley Rotary Club Peace Grove. A tree was planted in his honor in the Peace Grove in 1974. Some of the other members receiving this honor were 4 U.S. presidents, 3 popes, Sir Winston Churchill, the Dalai Lama, Martin Luther King Jr., and other dignitaries. Now that's pretty good company, I would say. In 1975, he was named UC Berkeley Alumnus of the Year, an honor he shared with many distinguished alumni, most of whom you know. Perhaps the most rewarding honor was to be awarded the George Catlett Marshall Medal by the Association of the United States Army in the year 2000. And he was again in the company of many distinguished people noted for their contributions to the Army and the community. U.S. Presidents Eisenhower, Truman, Ford, and H.W. Bush have also received this award. Several thousand people, the U.S. Army band, chorus attended the event. He gave a wonderful speech described as a history lesson by the press. Skip a little bit here. Fred loved and honored the man he fought with. He also loved his family. He attended with great patience to his wife Marlene through 14 years of Alzheimer's disease. He nurtured his 3 children, Carolyn, Robert, and Nancy. His grandchildren, his second wife Mary, and her family also benefited from his love and wisdom. My family also had the benefit of his love and companionship. My oldest son, John, who graduated from UC Berkeley, was a more liberal bent than his uncle, but they still had a good relationship. He introduced and taught his uncle transcendental meditation, and I believe that he used it on many occasions. My other son, Dick, wrote a song called Blistering Wind and recorded it. This was Fred's code name in Vietnam. Our daughters Ann and Patty loved their uncle and received his love in return. My wife Carol and I spent many occasions with him, even going to Vietnam in 1971. This is a portrait that now hangs in the Pentagon along with the other chief of staff of the Army. It was painted by a famous portrait artist, Bjorn Peter Egeli. In September 1995, a ceremony was held at Schofield Barracks celebrating the 50th anniversary of EJ. This is a picture of Fred giving the introductory speech for President William Clinton. In September 20th, 2011, the drill field at Schofield Barracks was renamed the Weyand Field. General Bramlett at the naming ceremony said, and I quote, "Whenever you pass, march, or conduct physical training on this field, remember the name Weyand. Remember what he stood for, what he has done for our nation, Army and Division, and also for each of us. We will be better for it." Thank you for being an attentive audience. It's not common for a 95-year-old to be able to have all these people listen to you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Weyand. I'd like to ask a question about you and your golfing achievements with John Merchant. I hear some rumors that you've shot your age or better on the golf course at 10 or 20 or 30 times. I'd like to hear a little bit about your golfing experience too.
Yes, like my track, I never had any speed, so everything sort of stayed level as I got older. So I've shot my age every year since I was 80. And in some years, 12 times. Okay. Well, thank you.
In closing, while his contributions to his country are legendary, and his subsequent contributions to the community and charity are also of note, I think that he would like that his true legacy would be the ideas he had for developing a more peaceful world. He gave a speech to the Honolulu Rotary in 2006. He started with, I want to share with you my experience beginning with ROTC at UC Berkeley. He talks about how it is our leaders who take us into war. He stated that he had been in 3 wars, none of which we were prepared for either mentally or physically. He then cited reasons contributing to peace or war, followed by conditions that promise for eventual peaceful resolution. These included man's built-in hunger for freedom, independence, security, and peace, the horrendous cost of war, population stability, and 7 other reasons. His final plea was for each of us to pursue a course of peace at home with civility and electing leaders who have these values. Thank you very much.